The Watergate scandal did not erupt in a vacuum. It was the culmination of a turbulent era in American politics, marked by social upheaval, public distrust, and shifting cultural dynamics. By the early 1970s, the United States was grappling with the aftershocks of the Vietnam War, civil rights struggles, and a growing generational divide. Anti-war protests and civil demonstrations had become common, and skepticism toward government officials was steadily rising. Against this backdrop, Richard Nixon, a seasoned politician with a reputation for shrewdness and pragmatism, secured the presidency in 1968, promising to restore order and dignity to a country weary of conflict and chaos. Nixon's administration inherited a politically divided nation and an increasingly adversarial press. His personality, paranoid, deeply distrustful of the media and political opponents, would play a key role in shaping the events that followed. Determined to secure re-election in 1972, Nixon and his campaign team created an environment where loyalty and secrecy were paramount. This climate fostered a willingness to engage in questionable, even illegal tactics, to undermine opponents and control the narrative. It was within this context that the seeds of Watergate were planted, as Nixon's inner circle blurred ethical lines in the relentless pursuit of political advantage. In the early hours of June 17, 1972, 5 men were arrested inside the Democratic National Committee, DNC, headquarters at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. They were caught with sophisticated surveillance equipment, cameras, and a trove of lock-picking tools. At first glance, the incident appeared to be nothing more than an unusual burglary. However, as investigators began to dig deeper, connections emerged between the burglars and President Nixon's committee to re-elect the president, often derisively referred to as creep. The group's mission had been clear: to wiretap phones, steal confidential documents, and gain political intelligence to ensure Nixon's landslide re-election later that year. What followed was a calculated cover-up operation orchestrated by key members of Nixon's administration. Top aides, including H.R. Haldeman and John Ehrlichman, worked to suppress the investigation by directing the CIA to interfere with the FBI's probe. Funds were funneled to the burglars in exchange for their silence, and misleading statements were fed to the press to downplay the White House's involvement. The strategy initially worked. Nixon won re-election in November 1972 in one of the most decisive victories in U.S. history. But the story refused to disappear. Persistent reporting from journalists like Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of The Washington Post, combined with mounting evidence of wrongdoing, began to erode the carefully crafted narrative of innocence, setting the stage for a political firestorm. As 1973 began, the threads of the Watergate cover-up started to unravel. The burglars, initially silent under pressure and financial incentives, began cooperating with investigators during court proceedings, revealing ties between themselves and higher-ups in Nixon's re-election committee. Meanwhile, the Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein continued publishing explosive stories, fueled by information from their anonymous source, famously known as Deep Throat, later revealed as FBI Associate Director Mark Felt. These reports painted a chilling picture of corruption, obstruction of justice, and systemic abuse of presidential power. In May 1973, the Senate Watergate Committee, led by Senator Sam Ervin, launched nationally televised hearings that captivated the nation. Millions of Americans tuned in to hear testimonies that implicated top White House officials. Among the most damning revelations was the testimony of John Dean, Nixon's former White House counsel, who provided detailed accounts of the administration's efforts to obstruct the FBI investigation. The scandal escalated further in July when it was revealed that Nixon had installed a secret taping system in the Oval Office that automatically recorded his conversations. These tapes, many believed, held irrefutable evidence of Nixon's involvement in the conspiracy. As subpoenas were issued for the tapes, Nixon resisted, citing executive privilege, which led to a constitutional showdown between the presidency, Congress, and the judiciary over the limits of presidential power. By late 1973, the pressure on President Nixon had intensified. Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox, appointed to independently investigate Watergate, demanded access to the Oval Office tapes that were believed to contain damning evidence of Nixon's involvement in the cover-up. Nixon, unwilling to release the tapes, ordered Cox to be fired. On the night of October 20, 1973, an event that became known as the Saturday Night Massacre, Nixon directed Attorney General Elliot Richardson to dismiss Cox. Richardson refused and resigned in protest. Deputy Attorney General William Ruckelshaus also refused and resigned. Finally, Solicitor General Robert Bork, acting as Attorney General, complied and fired Cox. This shocking series of events plunged the country into a constitutional crisis and caused public outrage. Polls showed a dramatic collapse in Nixon's support as Americans increasingly viewed him as an authoritarian figure abusing presidential power. The House of Representatives began serious discussions of impeachment, and under mounting political pressure, Nixon appointed Leon Jaworski as the new special prosecutor. When the Supreme Court unanimously ruled in United States v. Nixon 1974 that the tapes must be turned over, the end of Nixon's presidency became inevitable. The released recordings, particularly the smoking gun tape from June 23, 1972, revealed Nixon discussing ways to obstruct the FBI investigation, erasing any remaining doubt of his direct involvement. Facing certain impeachment in the House and conviction in the Senate, Nixon resigned on August 9, 1974, becoming the first U.S. president in history to do so. Vice President Gerald Ford was sworn in as president, and a month later issued a controversial pardon for Nixon, arguing that it was necessary to help the nation heal. The aftermath of the Watergate scandal left the United States in a state of shock and disillusionment. For many Americans, the resignation of President Richard Nixon symbolized the peak of political corruption and the dangers of unchecked executive power. The public's trust in government plummeted, with polls showing confidence in political leaders at historic lows. The scandal sparked a national reckoning about the role of the press, the balance of powers, and the importance of ethical leadership in a democracy. In the years that followed, Congress took significant steps to ensure that the abuses of the Nixon administration would not be repeated. The Federal Election Campaign Act, FECA, was strengthened, setting stricter limits on campaign contributions and increasing transparency in campaign financing. The War Powers Act of 1973, although passed slightly earlier, gained new relevance as lawmakers sought to rein in presidential authority. The creation of the Office of Government Ethics and the strengthening of the Freedom of Information Act provided additional oversight mechanisms to hold elected officials accountable. Additionally, the scandal highlighted the critical role of investigative journalism in exposing corruption, cementing the press as an essential watchdog in American democracy. While these reforms did not erase public cynicism, they marked a turning point in efforts to preserve the integrity and transparency of the U.S. government. The legacy of the Watergate scandal extends far beyond the resignation of Richard Nixon. It permanently reshaped the relationship between the American people and their government, fostering a deep sense of skepticism and a demand for transparency that continues to influence politics today. The suffix "gate" became a shorthand for political scandals attached to controversies across the globe, from Iran-gate in the 1980s to Bridge-gate and even Deflate-gate in sports. More importantly, Watergate served as a cautionary tale about the corrupting influence of power and the importance of maintaining strong checks and balances within a democratic system. In modern times, Watergate's lessons remain strikingly relevant. The scandal has been frequently revisited during contemporary debates over presidential power, political accountability, and the role of the media. Instances of government overreach or ethical misconduct are often measured against the Watergate standard, with the press and the public drawing parallels to the events of the 1970s. The story also underscores the enduring importance of investigative journalism and whistleblowers, whose courage and persistence were vital in uncovering the truth. Ultimately, Watergate is more than just a historical scandal. It is a reminder that vigilance, transparency, and adherence to the rule of law are essential to preserving the integrity of democratic institutions.